Today I'm going to be doing some spring planting, and I wanted to share some of my tips for pest management and also for getting maximum yield out of your space. Today I'm going to be planting in a brand new VegoGarden bed, and last year we got our first VegoGarden bed and we have really been loving it. So we were really happy that VegoGarden wanted to send us another bed that we've set up in our garden. And I do really love these beds because I think they will help us with some of the problems that we've had in our space, which I'll talk about a little bit. Last year we did have a little bit of an issue with this space. Some of the plants that were right here didn't do very well. I think part of that is because we have a comfrey plant like right here that kind of took like a lot of nutrients from the soil. So I think having this raised bed and adding some fresh new soil and compost is really going to help with that. Another really big issue that we've been having in our garden in general has been moles and voles. Last year the voles were a struggle for us. They were eating a lot of our plants and a lot of like my newly planted seedlings especially, so that my plants couldn't really get going. And I wanted to put in raised beds because I read that they can't climb up things very well, so I figured this would kind of create a barrier where they couldn't get to our plants. So I was actually going to ask Aaron to build me some like shallow raised beds, but then VegoGarden wanted to send us this raised bed, so I thought that was perfect because I wanted to put in raised beds in this space anyway. So that's definitely going to help with the voles, I think. And then to help with the moles that have definitely been like infesting our yard over the past year, what we did is when we set up this garden, underneath all of the soil, we put a couple of layers of wire underneath the soil. What we had was 1-inch chicken wire. I know you're actually supposed to use like hardware cloth, which has smaller holes, but since we were using the 1-inch chicken wire because we already had it, we just did 2 layers and we tried to like stagger the holes to make them smaller, if that makes sense. So I think that between the height of the bed and adding the wire underneath, I think that's going to help with a lot of our pest issues. After we're done planting everything, I'm also going to be adding a barrier of frost fabric or tulle on top of our seedlings, and that's going to help with a lot of issues that you might face with a lot of spring pests. And this is namely going to be for cabbage moths, which target a lot of spring crops because a lot of spring crops are in the brassica family, and this makes them susceptible to cabbage moths. And if you're not familiar with the types of plants that are in that family, it is everything from broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, bok choy, kale, collards, kohlrabi. Those are just some of the ones off the top of my head. So it's a lot of different plants that can be affected by cabbage moths. And if you have ever seen them in your garden, you probably know that they can really damage your crop. So we're gonna take some measures to prevent damage from those moths. So anyway, I think this bed is going to be a really nice new addition, or kind of like to revamp this space that hasn't really been working for us in the past year. And I want to show you some of the seedlings I'm going to be planting today. Here I have my broccoli seedlings. I started these on February 7th. And I've got a few of those. Then I have some Chinese cabbage. I have some cauliflower, and then I have some cabbage, just a couple of those plants. So those are some of the plants I'm going to be starting today. And then another thing I'm going to be doing is to maximize my space of this bed is I'm going to be interplanting whatever I transplant with radish seedlings. And this is a really great way to use all of your space because everything that I'm planting here, these tend to be very large plants, but they do take a little bit longer to get going. So while those are getting established, you can put radish seeds in between. These will only take a month before they're ready to harvest, so they are super fast to grow. And by the time you pull these out, all of these other plants are going to be larger and start taking up more space, but you're going to harvest these radishes and then these larger plants can continue using up more of the space. So that's my other tip for maximizing your yield. This is a great thing to do in the spring because all of these plants like to grow in pretty much the same weather conditions when it's like cooler and not too hot. So this is like the perfect time of year that I love to do this. So now let's get started with the planting. Like I said, we have to top off this bed with a little bit more compost to get the soil level closer to the top of the bed, and then we're going to get to planting. The bed that we're showing you in this video is the same one that we set up in our garden last fall. This is the 17-inch high 10-in-1 modular bed, and in our video last year we showed how we put this all together, and it's a super easy process. And that's one of the things that I love most about these raised beds, because anyone without any tools or equipment or even the means to go out and get wood or anything to build a raised bed, you can easily just order one of these. It ships to you in a really nice compact box, and it's very easy to put together. It only takes like 2 hours, and there are lots of different configurations for how you want your bed to be. We really like this longer, skinnier bed. It works really well in our gardens, and I have short arms so I can reach to both sides of the bed. Also, unlike any raised beds that you would make out of wood, these are going to last much longer because they're not going to rot. And I think if we ever had to move this around in our garden, or when we move to a new property, I think we would be able to disassemble these and bring it along with us, which is really great because we wouldn't be able to do that with any wooden raised beds. And we've done the same thing with this raised bed, where we filled in like the bottom layers with more rough materials, and then this top part is really nice potting soil and compost, so it's great to plant in right away. And when we did this last year, we immediately planted things and were able to harvest within a month, which is really amazing. It gets you up and going really quickly. So I'm really excited to have another one of these beds in our garden. We have really been loving the other one that we set up last year. If you're interested in trying them out, I will leave a link to their website down below, and thank you again to VegoGarden for sending us this bed. Alright, so we have planted up the bed. We did 2 rows of our larger plants, and then down the middle we did 2 lines of radishes. And we were able to fit 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19 of our larger plants. And then we're going to get a ton of radishes kind of like as a bonus. So now that these are all planted, I am going to be adding some hoops to this bed to support the netting or frost fabric that I'm going to put on top of it. And this is what I'm going to be using. We have this thick gauge wire. You find this near the chain link fencing at the hardware store. And we just cut it to like a good length that's gonna make a nice arch over the bed. And when you buy it, it comes in this like big coil, and you'll be able to make a lot of hoops out of this coil. So it's pretty cost effective, and they're plenty sturdy to be able to hold fabric. And yeah, so now we're gonna install these into the bed, and by install I mean just poke it into the soil, and then we're gonna cover it with some fabric. And that's gonna be a physical barrier so that the moths can't lay eggs onto our seedlings. That means that the caterpillars won't eat all of our plants. So when I've done this in the past, we end up with really beautiful plants that don't have any holes in them, which is really great for, obviously, for leafy greens. So there you go, our new bed is all planted up and hopefully protected from lots of pests for the spring. And I hope you enjoyed some of the tips that I shared to keep our vegetables safe and also to maximize production. Let me know if you have any tips for spring planting in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video.